corruption in boxing here. Hope everybody is doing well. So Naoya Inoue, aka the Monster, and the Nonito Donaire, the legendary Filipino Flash, had one singular objective earlier on today, and that was to knock each other out. And in the process of exchanging vicious head and body shots for 12 rounds, a fight that I was predicting to be the fight of the year certainly lived up to all of my expectations. But as somebody who has been following Naoya Inoue's progress when he turned professional many years ago and undertaking live streams back on Fuji TV when he was campaigning at 105 pounds, we know the usual rhetoric, being accused of being a hipster and blah blah this. To those who are simply ignorant, but it's not a question about a fighter being on a pound for pound list, a concept which is misunderstood by 98% of the people on these mundane YouTube boxing podcasts. It's a concept that I have no affiliation with because it's subjective. It's almost become diluted. Let's just, focus on the achievements of a fighter thus now. I've been critical of Naoya to a certain extent in terms of not cementing his position as the number one at either 105 pounds at minimum weight, a junior flyweight at 108 pounds. He obviously bypassed flyweight at 112 pounds and moved straight to super flyweight. So his body of work at those three weight categories were disappointing to me, but some of it was definitely due to fights not being successfully made, as fighters was overseas fighters and certainly Hispanic fighters were unwilling to travel to Japan. And people have got to realize that Japan has always been synonymous with those sort of weight categories, and television audiences for such fights can even get up to 15 million. So the money is clearly in Japan. And you do get to see a lot of fighters actually traveling there, fighters basing their careers there in famously in sort of Roman Gonzalez and Jorge Linares. But I'll come back to those issues another day. But the fight itself, Nonito Donaire really had no pressure on his shoulders. A consummate professional, a great champion, a fighter who has exemplified standards in boxing throughout his career. Had a little bit of a resurgence in the last sort of few years, winning, titles at bantamweight, in between sort of losing it to Jesse Magdalena, but coming back, decided to compete in the World Boxing Super Series. Now, Camoso obviously granted an invitation to all of the incumbent champions first of all. So the objective of Inoue, as well as it may have been Zelani Tete, who was in the tournament, was to try and unify. The one intangible was the WBC belt, further to Luis Neri's indiscretions over in Japan. So that belt had become vacated. And Nordin Abali, the Moroccan, contested that belt with the American Rashid Warren, and that was outside of the parameters of the tournament. Otherwise, a fantastic tournament could have been so much better. Now, Zelani Tete unfortunately had to pull out at the semi-final stage. Claims to have been, picked up an injury, just days before the fight. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I was hearing he was having problems with his new trainer, Floyd Mayweather Sr. I think preparations had not matured sufficiently for him to be confident enough about taking on the resurgent Donaire. So a replacement fighter stepped in at last notice, a spirited kid from hometown, and unfortunately he walked onto one of the Nonito's patented left hooks. A vicious knockdown, reminding the world that a mature and even so-called washed-up Nonito Donaire still possessed, power, accuracy, and timing. Confidence and desire is all of the attributes I would use. They're far more dangerous weapons to a confident fighter coming on the back end of some success. So this was really a clash of almost a metaphoric Nonito Donaire from 6-7 years ago against a veteran Nonito Donaire. Even though Inoue's style is very different. In science, we say that force is mass times acceleration, but a quality we associate with Naoya is explosiveness. And rather than sort of overcomplicated, I look at explosiveness as speed times power, and that's the way the monster very much fights. An explosive puncher, never a stationary target, always moving side to side, up and down, just looking to pounce. And when he pounces with one single punch, it could be a lead left hand to the body or a jab, he comes back with a sneaky two-punch combination, just with lightning strikes. And it's those punches that a fighter just doesn't expect, with the sheer velocity and force that has been responsible for so many knockdowns, 48 in the amateurs, and roughly an 80% knockout in his young sort of professional career, having achieved a good deal of success superficially, with won titles at 3 different weights. But a lot of those victories can be analysed and criticised as fighters, B-level fighters, or fighters like Oman Navayas, who was in his 40s, nevertheless a slick southpaw fighter who had never received any damage, amateur or professional. Fought even a prime Nonito Donaire, who survived through his negativity, Navayas that is, before Inoue, moving up 2 weights, put on an excellent display, showing 3 different types of methodology in terms of fighting his opponent, knocking him down with different sort of characteristics on the front foot, using body shots, using overhand rights, scintillating display. So Donaire's resurgence up against Inoue's, whose breathtaking knockouts in the first and second rounds, having not even gone past 3 rounds, dispatching Puerto Rican Emmanuel Rodriguez to capture the IBF belt in Scotland, who was a very good boxer, but pride got the better of him, decided to trade with Naoya in the middle of the ring, and suffered a broken nose with a beautiful left hook, and then never recovered with subsequent body shots, flooring him twice. And Baiano from the Dominican Republic, he simply got rattled with a 1-2 beautiful combination, ended the fight in the first round. Cook cold. Generally a tough opponent who can definitely survive a few rounds, but Inoue has a tendency of starting very, very fast. And Donaire was certainly cautious of that in this fight. Both fighters started off in a great deal of respect between both of them. Inoue was definitely wary of Donaire's power. Donaire started off actually very well. He was having actually having better of the exchanges at short range, which is interesting, as Inoue is a much shorter fighter at sort of 5'5". Donaire, a couple of inches taller, definitely 5'7", 5'8", roughly. Right. I'm not one to venture into box rec, but looked about 2 inches. Donaire, who is really a fighter who doesn't utilize his jab, one of the major criticisms, I think he could have been a much better fighter had he employed his jab a lot more. But he was definitely using that jab in this fight as well, but not using it initially to set up power punches. The jab was instrumental later on in getting it off balance, so he could almost catch him with the counter left hook coming him, then jabbing, then firing straight right hands. And Inoue was definitely feeling some of those good right hands, but it was a left hook in the second round. Beautiful left hook from the Filipino Flash, his signature punch. Inflicted Inoue's first cut as a professional. I'm not sure about whether he was ever cut as an amateur, but didn't appear to be a serious cut. Blood wasn't sipping into the eyes, but it was an indication that that the Filipino Flash was still very, very dangerous. And Inoue tends to drop his right hand, when he fires at straight right, he doesn't bring it up high. Certainly allows for clean headshots, although his head movement and his upper body movement is very, very good. But the Filipino Flash is not only a cerebral counterpuncher, allowing fighters to walk him down on the back foot, even taking steps back, one check step to his left. He's always been able to add a little bit of distance where he can fight at straight left hand. But in this fight at short range, he was shortening the left hand a lot better than I've seen in recent years. Amazing how he really has gone back, emphasized his game, really sharpened his technique. His body punching as well was prodigious in this fight. Now, Inoue hasn't really been chin-checked significantly in this fight. David Carmona was definitely landing some punches on him. Good right hands. Carmona, a very resilient fighter before, losing some traction later on in his career. Inoue in that fight, one thing he did show was his ability to fight at different ranges. He started off at the center ring, but he finished off the fight fighting on the back foot, lateral movement, pot shorting Carmona. And those attributes were definitely, he had to utilize them in this fight, given a lot of the adversity he was having with Donaire, who started to really chop down on the right hand, doubling, trebling, quadrupling on that straight right hand, changing the angle he was punching down, so he was getting maximum leverage on those punches. So very quickly, Inoue had to disengage from fighting and trading at short range. So the psychological battle was going to Nonito Donaire. But when one fighter would have the advantage, the other fighter would come straight back. There was very minimal clinching in this fight. Both fighters were just trading vicious shots. When one was hurt, the other would come back. When you felt that one fighter could potentially go down, he would catch a second win and come back. A magnificent fight, toe-to-toe, we're always very critical of a fighter's defenses or whatever, but the objective is to entertain and put on a spectacular bout, you know, living up to your expectations. Inoue was getting notoriety by some of his knockouts, so US audiences were tuned in on ESPN. The world of, you know, the world of boxing was focused on this fight, and they put on a spectacular fight. Inoue coming back, catching Donaire with a vicious overhand right. Nonito Donaire with his cast iron chin, apart from the Nicholas Waters fight, but he was at a heavier weight. You know, his knees buckled on the brink of going down, but the old war horse survived. You know, he really wanted to win this fight. Some of his defensive skills when he was hurt, his survival skills in particular, those that could only be amassed through experience of being in similar predicaments before, and he showed all of that in this fight as well. Came back the subsequent rounds having the advantage, and he hurt Nonito Donaire. It was the right hand this time. Inoue got very, very lazy with that right hand. He wasn't moving his upper body that much, almost became a stationary target, and blocked Naoya Inoue's jab. The 1-2 came back with his own right hand, and Inoue was badly hurt. The Japanese crowd, 20,000 in all, a magnificent crowd. You know, I like a lot of respect, a lot of decorum. When the fight was contested, they're generally very, very quiet, so you really can hear the acoustics of the punches. So it's very easy to differentiate blows which have landed on head, body, muscle, glove, etc. You know, just a perfect sort of scenario for those who are, you know, analysing a fight, scoring a fight, etc. You know. But Inoue definitely has a good chin. You know, we've seen him hit time by time before. One of the fighters who doesn't really bother about defense too much. It's all about a vicious killer instinct he had. He wants to lay you out, simple as that. And in the process, you're going to take punches. He's opening up. He's very, very aggressive. Not a cautious fighter. You know, not reticent about opening up. You know, dropping those hands. You know, to invest into the body. And yeah, he will get caught. And against somebody with that sort of timing, he got caught. But it's all about, you know, how good is he? How good is his powers of recovery? Because having a good chin is not only about that, it's about the stability and the fortitude in your legs. You know, those that can be flawed very, very easily. Yeah, are they still able to come up and dominate a fight? So it's only down to your balance if you're not. But if you rise and come up and you don't have the same sufficient punch power, or your punch volume depletes, then clearly those punches have had an effect. Then you can argue you have, you know, that your chin may be potentially suspect. But, you know, Nonito Donaire, remember, he's the fighter who's fought at the heavier weight categories. He's the much bigger fighter, so technically one can argue he was the one who was actually weight bullying in this fight, coming back down in weight, up against a fighter who is moving progressively up and up in weight. So Donaire was carrying all of the power, but in a way, credit to him, you know, he took those blows and he came back, and 8, 9, 10, 11 had some very, very big rounds. In the, can't even remember if it was the 10th or the 11th round, but he started combining single punches into combination punches. You know, what he was doing, he was resorting back to the tactics in the Carmona fight. He was moving more laterally, and he was pot-shotting single punches. And Donaire was having some difficulty when he was stepping in with his right hand. He was having success, you know, stepping in, using his longer reach, his longer legs, moving forward, so pushing Inoue backwards. You know, a good tactic. So multiple, you know, right hands, you know, good jabs. You know, if Nonito Donaire had invested more in the body, then he could have. It hypothetically, we never know, but the outcome of the fighter could have been very, very different. But Inoue's slow momentum was coming back. Donaire's, the right hand side of his face was definitely marked up. Heavy bruising under his right eye from a lot of the left hooks that Inoue was landing. Certainly when he pivots off, when he exits. The punch that he knocked at Koi Kono with one of the veterans in Japan, it was that left hook on the exit which was causing, because he spins round, so he changes the angle. So Donaire is almost thinking that he's exiting, but he lands with that sort of check left hook. And that was certainly having some good success as well. But it was the body work. You know, Inoue was landing vicious body shots, combinations, 1-2s to the body throughout. He was generally a very, very good body puncher, and we know with Donaire, with a good chin, so it was a good tactic to go to the body, and eventually it paid dividends. Inoue landing a sort of check left hook to the body, and Donaire turned to his side. Don't know what the hell the referee was doing, almost pushing Inoue. Inoue was looking to come in and try and finish off Donaire, but the referee almost intervened, pushing Inoue back, not allowing him to finish off. And Donaire had the delayed reactions with, the liver is a 2-pound, sometimes 3-pound organ on the right hand side. It is one of the most hard working organs, so punches to that side, will have debilitating effects. And we saw Nonito Donaire finally go down. Maybe it was an involuntary knee, knowing that Inoue was coming to finish him off. Plus he was hurt. There's always a delayed reaction with those sort of shots. Now, I didn't count out exactly how long he was down, but he rose at 9. But with all of the melee and trying to get Naoya to go to the neutral corner as well, the count may have been longer than 10. I'm not sure. It was pretty chaotic scenes. I was just trying to see what the referee was trying to do, so I didn't count it myself or have the opportunity to watch the fight again so I could actually do a stopwatch count. But we'll give Nonito the benefit of the doubt. A very, very difficult fight for both fighters in terms of the punishment they were shipping and exchanging throughout. So eventually Donaire got up, he survived. There wasn't that long left in the round, and in the 12th round, Donaire probably realized he needed a knockout. The fight was definitely close up until the knockdown. You could have even had it even up until then. That's not disagreeable. Donaire had some of the better of the early rounds. Hurt Inoue badly once, but a couple of times as well. You could see Inoue disengaging. Similarly, Inoue had hurt Donaire badly, dipped his knees. I think that could have been the 8th, and then floored him in the 11th. So yeah, an even bout up until then is fine. But a 10-8 in the 11th and the 12th round, Inoue was having the better of the 12th round as well. Donaire still a little bit hurt, but he was coming back with some right hands, definitely was landing. So, both fighters were landing in the 12th round, but both of them were still trying to knock each other out as well, and that was the modus operandi throughout the fight. Just a great, a great spectacle for boxing. Two fighters who were just, looking to land that. And in the realms of all of the other fights of the year, I'm sorry, but Errol Spence and Sean Porter, you cannot even, for me, it's not even a decent fight, because Errol Spence was exposed as being horribly overrated. He was neutralized very easily by Sean Porter. Had no counter, short right hand for a southpaw at that short range. So with his minimal punching options, relied on premeditated low blows and rabbit punches to try and get Sean Porter off him. That's all he could do, and allowed by a corrupt system, and their corrupt organization, the Fox PBC, who were just trying to make him as a pay-per-view star. And Sean Porter got absolutely no justice in that fight. So Sean Porter had absolutely won that fight. You know, you can't even count the circa between 30 and 40 illegal blows that Errol Spence landed. So those are illegal blows. I don't count them. Nor should you, nor should the judges, nor should anybody else who claims to be a boxing fan. So no. The only other fight that are compatible is, as I talked about before, Angel Acosta and Elvin Soto. But controversy marred that as well. This horribly stopped in the final round when Acosta was leading, but had already been floored in one round. And even if he'd gone down in the 12th, he still would have won the fight on the cards. But it was a brilliant, brilliant fight, nevertheless. And Josh Taylor and the Regis Prograis put on an excellent fight, but that fight is not comparable to this fight. You know, Regis Prograis was not really was fighting more of Josh Taylor's fight at sort of short range. But still, you know, it was a spectacular fight. You know, both of them were trading heavy punches, but this fight was better skill. You had fighters fighting. They were both fluctuating between lead punches, counter punches. Initially, Inoue counter punching in the early parts when Donaire was the ring general, commanding center ring, forcing Inoue on the back foot, forcing Inoue just to counter punch. But then Inoue, once he had some success, would come back up and try and dominate the fight, and then Donaire would have to counter punch to get the momentum back. Then after Donaire had hurt Inoue started fighting laterally to try and get his second win and recover, and then try and break down Donaire with pot shots and singular power punches, and that was working as well. So we saw pretty much everything, how fighters deal with adversity, being hurt badly with cuts, taking vicious body punching, hardly any clinching. There was no dirty fighting. They weren't trying to elbow or headbutt one another. Yes, there was an occasional clash of heads, but I think there was an unbelievable amount of respect between the two fighters. You know, we know Inoue is looked at Nonito Donaire as one of his all-time heroes, somebody who he aspires to, emulating his success. And we saw that after, you know, fantastic, modest, you know, humbleness between the two fighters as well. Yeah, one of the best bantamweight fights I've seen in recent years, and definitely one of the best fights. Very, very exciting fight. The double I took on Nordin Bali, beating Takuma Inoue, who was also very, very spirited in that fight. You know, really changed his tactics second half of the fight and was pushing the Bali back, the WBC champion. So Inoue, his younger brother, fought a good fight, but I thought that fight would go on points, and I felt Nonito Donaire, his chin was tough enough, and I felt his boxing acumen was good enough, and his punching power would keep Inoue honest as well. So I felt this fight would go to points as well. So corruption in boxing, his predictions, you know, that's why I'm a professional speculator. You know, most people who are employees work 9 to 5, you know. I'm not. This is what I do for a living. So if I don't get things right, I don't have food on my table. So yeah, fantastic fight. What's next for the both fighters? You know, there's a perfect narrative for Naoya Inoue to fight Nordin Bali, who is on this card. So if MTK Global can set up that fight in Japan, that fight will be for 3 belts, as the WBA belts were consolidated now. The WBA Super, you don't have any mandatories, so I don't know what the hell the WBA is going to do, the sanctioning body. One of the most inept and corrupt organizations. They're probably going to recycle the regular belt, and they'll if they're setting up a new office in Latin America somewhere, then there's no doubt they're going to recycle that belt like they did in Japan before, when they were setting up offices in Tokyo, when Hassan and Dam was fighting for when they recycled that belt from the Golovkin and the Jacobs bout. So Hassan Imdam and Murata fought for that WBA, so I'm sure they're going to recycle this belt as well. You know, maximize revenue. It's all about market share with belts now. A market share that equates to economies of scale and money ultimately for these sanctioning bodies. Pretty good tactic, they'll even set up franchise championships now with the WBC, and that objective, they're very shrewd. They realize that given the demarcation with all of these television networks now, so we'll have WBC champions both on. You got to look at it with Jamal Charlo. They immediately did it when he was mandatory for a DAZN fighter, so they recycled, so they issued a new belt, so they had a WBC champion on that fight, knowing full well that Al Heyman is now changed his business model from going from time buys and going from regular showtime to pay-per-view fighters. So the WBC and Al Heyman are inadvertently creating pay-per-view fighters facilitated by these franchise championship belts. So the regular WBC belt now goes to one of their fighters. And on the other side, with Vasily Lomachenko being on ESPN, Devin Haney being his mandatory DAZN fighter, they've now created an ancillary belt, giving it to Devin Haney. So now they have a WBC representatives on the DAZN side, and they have gone on the ESPN side as well. So very, 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 very clever from the WBC. That's how that's what you call business continuity, people. That's anybody who's looking to increase their portfolio and maximize their wealth can certainly learn a hell of a lot from the strategies of these sanctioning organizations. As human beings, we're never content. We're always want more, and nobody wants more than any of these organizations. I was doing an investigation of these sanctioning bodies a number of years ago, and I haven't actually released my documentation, but I was looking at their activities in terms of the businesses they were investing in. Well, you can call it laundering their money as well. But facilitation payments in Asia in some of the casinos they were doing, but I'll keep that under wraps for now. I'll bring it out at another time, stuff that Thomas Hauser wouldn't even know about. Okay, so what's next? I think Nonito Donaire would make an absolutely fantastic boxing promoter. He commands respect throughout boxing. As we talked about, he was one of the pioneers of full 360 degrees drug testing. Floyd Mayweather is an absolute fraud in that sense. Through his therapeutic use exemptions, Floyd has never exemplified that. A proponent of so many substances over the years, human growth hormones, etc. Hid under the USADA, minimal drug testing, and they don't even have to disclose full findings to any of the sanctioning bodies. You only have got to analyze their protocols to say that they're one of the worst. USADA is the worst drug testing organization in the history of drug testing. Let's not remember they were overseeing all of the Tour de France as well for the US postal team, and made to look like fools for over 9 years. So Donaire, I think fighters will definitely look up to him as well. So I think he would make an excellent promoter. I think he can be almost DAZN's representative over in the Philippines and in Asia as well. DAZN's largest revenue base is in Asia. So it's a good opportunity of competing with, Fuji TV, etc. If they can set up operations there. Certainly in terms of boxing, Donaire can oversee it I know he's based in Las Vegas, Nevada, but he can attract fighters from anywhere. And a fighter who's is generally for pretty much everybody as well, so if he can implement those ideals with some of his fighters and try and encourage them to endeavour in more tournaments like the World Boxing Super Series, then boxing will be significantly better as well. It's no coincidence that all of the best fights have been from the World Boxing Super Series. Fighters in their prime, Regis Prograis, Josh Taylor, Garcia, Dorticos, Nonito, Donaire, maybe not in his prime, but two excellent fighters, and when you pair them together, you're going to get great fights, Credit to the Zone as well, who took on the World Boxing Super Series. US audiences never even got to see any of it last year. It just goes to show that their appetite for boxing is just... The US is as dead as Dillinger. I'm sorry. Economically, it definitely is. There's no doubt about it. When the economy is relied on, just creating 17 trillion downs worth of finite currency, not backed by absolutely anything, then you know that a currency is effectively dead. And that's the state of your boxing as well. It's as dead as anything. Fixated by the ideals of their once great past in heavyweight boxing, that seems to be their barometer pretty much. Don't give a fuck about any other weight divisions, etc. Not even a lot of emphasis on Regis Prograis as well, and that's an old school fighter as well. Credit to him. Going overseas, whereas Floyd Mayweather and the Andre Wards didn't even give a fuck about being the true examples of world champions and fighting around the world. Yet they harbour and lust for their returns. And Andre Ward, who strategically retired like Sugar Ray Leonard used to do so much in the past, a model that was emulated to the very T by Floyd Mayweather. Whenever these young killers would come up, he would just engineer a retirement. Floyd and Andre Ward having done the same, citing the breakdown of his body, but now he's expressing real interest to coming back, knowing that Canelo Alvarez is now a light heavyweight champion. Anybody who wins the Canelo sweepstakes will now get at least $15 million. And Andre Ward, a fake Christian, let's face it, consumed by Benjamins and the dollar, no doubt he will take that fight. That's the shambles that is Canelo Alvarez and all of those parasites around him as well. That's a disgrace. Canelo Alvarez, who loves to suspend drug testing beyond not even engaging above 8 weeks drug testing where he was caught before. A fighter who puts on so much muscle mass with no body fat as well. But absolutely nobody talks about that when he defeats Sergey Kovalev. Boxing has just become an absolute joke, man. Mainstream boxing in particular. But when fighters are like, when boxing fans criticize other boxing fans who pay more attention to the fighters who have to fight for subsistence wage, basically, pretty much get no shine until in recent years. A lot of the hard work been done by Nonito, Donaire, and and in particular Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez having, you know, HBO backing him when he came to the United States. But sadly, it was at the end of his career, so boxing fans never got to see him at his absolute best, when he was absolutely not taking any punches, where he had some of the best defense from a stationary position that we've seen in recent years. You know, 20 times better fighter than Andre Ward. But when he had surpassed Alexis Arguello, he had become a wealthy person, scorned by the death of his mentor and his trainer. Having reached his physical capacity, gone up 4 weight divisions, that's more than 10% of his body weight, more than a fighter like Andre Ward, only going up from 168 to 175 pounds. When you look at pound for pound in terms of your body weight, fat and water ratio, the actual index, if you measure it, Nonito Donaire having more of an adversity, but people were criticizing for being as a pound for pound fighter. But if you analyze Andre Ward, every single one of his marquee victories was against a fighter who had already been defeated. You know, Carl Froch already been defeated, Mikhail Kessler already been defeated, Arthur Abraham already been defeated, Sakio Bika already been knocked out, all of them. Sergey Kovalev, I'm sorry, had already been beaten by Darnell Boom, floored 3 times, but the fight was given a split decision. Chad Dawson already been beaten by Jean Pascal. So Andre Ward, I'm sorry, you'd never beaten a prime fighter, an undefeated fighter in their prime. Whereas Gonzalez had beaten unified champions, both past and future, more unified champions than anybody else. But people have never really respected his boxing achievements. But the junior flyweight division is the best in boxing, I've said now. And with the addition now of Hassanboy Dusmatov, the gold medalist from Uzbekistan, who is fighting the Venezuelan fighter, WBA regular champion, who is one of the best fighters at that fight. When you're fighting a fighter like that in your first professional fight, you know, what does that say about these weight categories? And as I've said it in my previous videos, these fighters have... That's why those weight divisions are the best, because they fight one another. They have more fights. You've got Felix Alvarado, the IBF champion, taking on Ken Shiro, the WBC champion, 108 pounds, and the Japanese New Year's Eve supercards. Ahashi Tekken Promotions, you know, they put on 3-4 cards over 2 days. You know, some of the best fights. Carlos Canizares and Hassanboy Dusmatov. What a fight that's going to be. Now with Angel Acosta moving up to 112, I'm so sad he's not having the rematch with Elvin Soto. Soto has now got the WBO belt, and he's a very dangerous puncher as well. Standout Mexican amateur. Not a great deal of experience within the professional ranks, but when you're able to take a guy with almost a 100% knockout ratio in Acosta, deal with that sort of power and come back, floor him and hurt him in the 12th, you know, that's a fighter who could be a pound for pound level fighter. Elvin Soto, one to watch out for people. But yeah, I've talked a little bit about everything, you know, just catching up for all of the months where I have not been able to generate any videos. Apologies people, I'm in a lot of emotional pain at the moment. You know, I've had a very difficult passing away a few months ago, and I'm still induced with so much sorrow and pain and affliction, and my mind is not even on boxing and conducting any boxing videos, but I'm just trying to deal with that sort of, trying to cope with all of that, and so hopefully we'll get to some sort of continuity in regular videos in the future. So Thank you all for your patience. Hope you've appreciated this this rather protracted breakdown. Let me know your thoughts in the comment field. That'd be greatly appreciated as well. So Corruption Boxing, sayonara, and God bless you all.